Remember to subscribe, like, and share this video. Thank you so much. Good morning. Just like always, you mentioned before that you wrote another book. It's called *Heartless Star. Now it has been translated. This time, just like before, it's Morgan's latest book. In the previous volume of Get Rich *, it talked about a rule where a tiny action can cause a big change. It described an experience where a friend of his went skiing, and in the end, two close friends were caught in an avalanche. They got into trouble because they went skiing without making this decision carefully, without calculating any risks, or asking people for advice. Their survival was purely a coincidence, but this decision became one of the most important turning points in their lives. It's more significant than any carefully considered decision they made in the past or might make in the future. Similarly, when America fought for independence against Britain, the British originally had the intention to defeat Washington's army, but due to their ships being unable to sail, Washington survived. Many historians believe that without this incident, America might not have established the rules that are now considered unpredictable. The third rule is: the first rule of happiness is to lower expectations. Our lives today, as ordinary people, are already better than that of emperors in the past. Although they might have had thousands of concubines in their palaces, they absolutely couldn't play video games, and they could suddenly die of smallpox. We actually live better lives. Comparing ourselves to others around us determines our happiness. Our expectations are easily overlooked because they aren't explicitly clear. The fourth rule, being unique and independent, is a good thing. It reminds me of a certain fencing athlete who won a championship. At that time, people thought he must be a genius, possessing some unique talents. Many geniuses today are actually considered eccentric. If they were truly so quiet and didn't have any peculiar habits, like not throwing off their masks, they might not have become Newton. There's also a famous American fighter pilot who is known to be a bit eccentric, but you can't deny their talent. The fifth rule: what we pursue is not accuracy. Humans are naturally bad with numbers. The current typhoon might be considered a once-in-a-century event. The current earthquake might happen once every 800 years, but in reality, these events might have a 1% chance of happening every year. However, if we simultaneously calculate different centennial events, such as tornadoes, which might happen once in 100 years, floods might be once in 80 to 120 years, and a volcanic eruption every 800 to 1,200 years, then these events would seem to happen every year. Our understanding of probability is very crude. We really think that we have to wait until we are 100 years old to encounter these events, but that's not the case. It's possible to encounter a once-in-a-century event every year. The sixth rule: a real story is more powerful than data. When things are complicated, stories act like a lever. The most persuasive story is one that you are willing to believe or is related to your own experience. A good story can make you focus on one place. So a good story can give a voice to people whose words might not have been believed because their presentation wasn't good, or some things I personally believed to be true were actually just marketing. The seventh rule: the world is driven by unquantifiable factors. There are many things in the world that do not conform to data, which might sometimes be contradictory. An analysis may not always be logical, but these things happen because humans often act contrary to reason. Various historical accounts also reflect this. One historian mentioned that logic is a human invention, but not recognized by the universe. If we expect the world to be as straightforward as a mathematical equation, we might be wrong. For example, the Battle of the Bulge was the deadliest battle for the United States in history, with 70,000 soldiers injured or killed in a month. The American forces were caught off guard because their generals logically believed that the Germans would not attack. They reasoned that the Germans didn't have enough troops, most of their soldiers were inexperienced, and they were already short on fuel and food. The terrain in the Ardennes forest of Belgium was also very challenging, and the weather conditions were poor. So any reasonable German commander wouldn't have launched an attack there. However, the Americans did not expect that Hitler had lost his sanity, immersed in his fantasies. When German commanders asked how they would secure enough fuel to support the offensive, Hitler told them to steal it from the Americans. They were already imagining success. During this period, a US general's aide said that if they were thinking normally, they would have anticipated the German attack long ago, but the Germans were not acting normally. So no matter how logical or strong your reasoning abilities are, they cannot be applied to that time period. Economist Keynes, who studied the economy, argued that it was not mechanistic, but rather full of emotions and feelings. So Keynes referred to it as the animal spirits. If we think that the stock price is entirely determined by the company's earnings, interest rates, and tax rates, then we are missing something. It's as if we forget that history has repeatedly seen people being burned for being witches, or wars being started due to bloodshed. History often repeats itself, and it will continue to do so. Our bodies are not machines, and we cannot expect them to behave like machines. Our bodies will perceive, have emotions, and feel fear, and all of this will affect humans. The most classic case is Lehman Brothers, where the company's Tier 1 capital ratio, a measure of its ability to withstand losses, was 11.7, and it had even grown, higher than Goldman Sachs and Bank of America. Lehman Brothers had more capital than the previous year, and everything seemed as usual. But within 72 hours, Lehman Brothers went bankrupt. What happened during those 3 days? The only change was that investors lost confidence in Lehman Brothers, stopped buying their bonds, and the next day, they no longer extended credit to Lehman. Lehman's funds dried up in a short period. In this situation, trust was the most crucial factor, yet it was hard to quantify or predict in advance. Traditional financial metrics couldn't help. Let's look at another example, a company called GameStop. In 2020, this company was essentially bankrupt, but suddenly, it received a frenzy of support online, causing its stock to surge dramatically. These two cases reflect the same principle. When a major event occurs, especially during a crisis, the most critical factor is not the numbers, but the narrative everyone believes. If the story makes everyone believe that Lehman Brothers is reliable, then tomorrow, Lehman will survive. If the story convinces you that a near-bankrupt company is highly valuable, then its stock could reach new heights the next day. All data can be measured, but stories cannot be calculated. Therefore, the outcome is usually unpredictable. In summary, what is economics? The concept of economic value is quite simple. Anything that has demand, for whatever reason, will have value. It's not determined by its utility, but by demand, and much economic activity is driven by public sentiment. Emotions are hard to quantify, yet they play a significant role in finance, workplace dynamics, and interpersonal relationships. If something cannot be quantified, its power cannot be measured. The rule is that madness doesn't necessarily lead to collapse. Madness transcends and is rooted in greed and fear, the two primary human emotions. Humans constantly oscillate between these two mindsets. At first, when things go well, you're happy and become more optimistic. Then, you ignore the risks, deny them, and become anxious about bad things happening. You accept them, worry about them constantly, ignore good things, then suddenly believe in them again. This cycle leads to another stage of instability. The Minsky moment hypothesis suggests that the economy becomes unstable not because of many mathematical factors, but because of this psychological cycle. When things are stable, people become overly optimistic. When they feel extremely optimistic, they take on more debt, and this leads to economic instability. So, the conclusion is that stability inherently breeds instability. Prosperity sows the seeds for the next downturn, because we can never resolve the inherent financial and social relationships that shift from being beneficial to stability to detrimental. When we believe everything will get better, our mindset pushes us step by step toward instability. This principle is universal. If the stock market never falls, then stock prices would keep rising indefinitely. What would you do? You would invest everything you have, borrow money to buy more stocks, maybe even sell your house to buy even more. But when the stock market unexpectedly crashes, it could hit you in unforeseen ways. The 6 principles we must remember are uncertainty, randomness, coincidence, timing, inappropriateness, and movement. If asset prices are highly inflated, there's no room for error, and the market could collapse. If everyone believes the market is unshakable, it's on the verge of crashing. Now, let's consider another scenario: rapid growth. If you try to force something to grow too quickly, it may backfire. For example, no matter how many women you gather, it's impossible to have a baby in 1 month. In 1994, Starbucks had only 425 stores. By 1999, the number had reached over 1,500, opening a new store every 2 hours. However, this rapid expansion weakened Starbucks' foundations, leading to layoffs of 12,000 employees and a 73% drop in its stock price. The same principle applies elsewhere. When small trees grow under the shade of large trees, they grow slowly, but this slow growth strengthens their wood. If young trees are placed in an open field with plenty of sunlight, they grow quickly, but their wood remains soft and weak, making them vulnerable to disease. Trees that grow fast also decay faster and lose their chance to become towering giants. In the animal kingdom, if you raise fish in cold water, they grow slower than in warm water. When both groups are placed in normal temperatures, the slow-growing fish eventually outlive the fast-growing ones, with their lifespan exceeding the average by 30%. In contrast, the fast-growing fish have a lifespan 15% shorter than the average. Rapid growth results in biological tissue that is less able to repair damaged molecules. When resources are transferred to other places, and growth slows down, more resources will be used for maintenance and repairing damaged molecules. This is why turtles live longer. The principle is actually quite easy to understand. For example, if I ask you to build a car, if you have to deliver it in a month versus in a year, which car do you think will be more reliable? Definitely the one built in a year. In our lives, the biggest obstacle to creativity is a lack of patience. Whether it's a rush to complete something or to be the first, the most important things, whether in business, investment, or life, are determined by patience and persistence. We need to proceed step by step and build things up gradually to realize them in the end. Humans, in their pursuit of great ambitions, often make 2 common mistakes. Either they want too much too quickly, or they try to avoid difficulties altogether. The most important question to remember is that adversity always exists. It can inspire someone to realize that the only constant is change. No major innovation happens in peaceful times. If it does, it's usually in the middle of a big mess, or after a great disaster. Take cars and airplanes, for example. These are very important in modern society, and both were born under challenging circumstances. Would anyone have thought of using them to go on vacation back then? At first, when people saw cars and planes, they probably asked 2 things. Where is the gun mounted, and can we throw the Wright brothers off? The Wright brothers themselves, though they didn't want to sell their invention to private individuals, hoped Washington's military would adopt their technology. Many famous inventions, like radar, nuclear chips, jet planes, antibiotics, intercontinental highways, helicopters, GPS, digital cameras, microwaves, and synthetic materials, are either directly or indirectly related to military research. Why is this? Why do military organizations seem to have a unique insight into these technologies? Or is it that the most talented engineers and scientists are drawn to the military? Because if the military couldn't solve urgent problems, we would all be in a constant state of anxiety. They come up with efficient solutions to critical problems in a very short amount of time. Many innovations are driven by the urgency and seriousness of their missions, coupled with significant investment in manpower and funds, often achieving results beyond normal expectations. In peacetime, these innovations can appear very useful. For example, if in 2018 I asked you to make a vaccine against a potential SARS comeback, you'd probably work slowly. But when COVID-19 hit, we managed to develop various useful vaccines in the shortest time possible. Despite many controversies, human creativity can be maximized during times of anxiety or life and death crises. Innovations driven by pressure can indeed be beneficial if the pressure is moderate, but excessive pressure can lead to failure. When people are overwhelmed, they may choose to give up rather than fight through it. Therefore, too much pressure can hinder innovation. The 10th rule: good things accumulate slowly, while bad things happen instantly. This means that to know if something will be successful, time and effort must accumulate, whereas a fatal mistake can instantly lead to disaster. The progress of society, company growth, and other fields generally move slowly. The real GDP per capita in the US has been increasing since the 1900s, and the American standard of living has now reached that of modern-day Turkmenistan. But if you look at the numbers, the average annual growth rate is only about 3%. No matter where you are, the average growth rate is relatively slow. Bad things, however, are different. They often strike without warning, catching people off guard, as seen with the collapse of Lehman Brothers, a company that went from a peak to bankruptcy in less than 15 months. Enron, Nokia, the Libyan government under Gaddafi, the 2019 fire at Notre Dame, and even the dissolution of the Soviet Union, all these events went from birth to ashes almost in an instant. When it comes to life, it's the same. To create a life from a single cell, it takes tens of billions of steps. But to end a life, it only takes one incident. This shows that life is fragile. The birth of a human being is complex, but their death reminds us that many good things happen because they are meant to, while many bad things happen because of unexpected events. The 12th rule. Studies show that the main reason for an increase in obesity isn't necessarily overeating during meals, but rather eating too many snacks throughout the day. This example also reflects that many disasters result from a series of small oversights, which ultimately lead to catastrophe. The Soviet Union once built a nuclear bomb, which the US dropped on Hiroshima. This bomb's power was 15 kilotons. That's why it's called the Little Boy. Even 1,000 meters away, its mushroom cloud could still be seen, rising as high as 68,000 feet. You might wonder why you haven't heard of this super bomb, because it was too powerful. Experts calculated that if it detonated near a mountain, the rocks would disappear, and the entire island would turn into a huge landslide. The fire following the explosion could consume an area as large as the state of Maryland. So, in the end, it was deemed too dangerous. If you look back at the 1900s, with reverse thinking, making smaller, more solid nuclear bombs with less risk of destroying the world, they wouldn't have changed the rules of war. Small nuclear bombs, easy to make and with a lower threshold for reasonable use, have actually changed the game of war. The situation escalates when small nuclear weapons are used. If you deploy such a weapon, the other side might retaliate with their own small nuclear weapons, forcing you to suppress them. However, this could lead to an escalation into full-scale war. If small weapons fail to suppress the opposition, it greatly increases the likelihood of large nuclear weapons being used. Therefore, small risks can lead to larger risks, becoming a trigger for greater dangers. Last year, there was a hit movie involving a scenario where many people used small nuclear weapons, hoping to reduce risks. However, this was a mistake, as the use of small nuclear weapons actually increased the likelihood of large-scale nuclear attacks. Major risks are often easily overlooked, because they are triggered by a series of small events. One of the most tragic examples is when two Boeing 747s collided head-on, ultimately leading to 583 deaths. The accident report identified 11 different errors, most of which were small and occurred simultaneously, leading to the collision. We often underestimate the likelihood of crises happening to us, but major crises usually build up from small incidents. It is important to recognize that the accumulation of small incidents can lead to significant dangers. Our current good fortune may be the result of numerous small, seemingly insignificant good decisions stacking up. Progress requires a balance of optimism and pessimism. Humans tend to oscillate between these two extremes. Interestingly, the best financial plan involves being pessimistic in saving but optimistic in investing. The best approach to life is to believe that tomorrow will be better while also acknowledging the harsh realities of the present. Viktor Frankl, who survived concentration camps, always believed he would endure and be reunited with his family. His optimism was crucial. On the other hand, those who kept saying they would be home by Christmas often suffered the most severe mental breakdowns when it didn't happen. Frankl advocated for the belief in a positive outcome while facing the brutal reality of the present. Balancing these two mindsets is crucial in any challenging situation. The pursuit of perfection often leads to inefficiency. In fact, 99% of all species have gone extinct, because there is no way to evolve into a perfect being that can adapt to every environment. Similarly, modern humans often aim for high efficiency, but neglect the need for sufficient downtime. Even Einstein emphasized the importance of spending time on the beach, allowing the mind to relax and think freely. Successful individuals like Buffett spend a significant amount of time doing seemingly unproductive activities, such as reading, which ultimately contributes to their success. In the automotive industry, for example, just-in-time production is praised for its efficiency. However, during a crisis, traditional manufacturers who kept some inventory fared better than those who relied solely on just-in-time methods. Perfection leaves no room for error, and those who are too focused on perfection may end up being the most vulnerable. In 1846, the Donner Party, a group of pioneers, attempted to take a shortcut through the Sierra Nevada during their journey to California. They underestimated the challenges, resulting in them being trapped by early snowfalls. Out of the 87 people, many died from starvation and exposure. Their tragic fate was the result of a series of small errors and underestimations, demonstrating how small risks can snowball into catastrophic outcomes. When she recalls the tragic situation at home back then, she still remembers. She said that at the time, her daddy kept feeding her some strange meat while crying, telling them, "I have nothing else. Everything comes down to shortcuts, so we have no choice but to accept it. Everything has its value, nothing is ever free." But we often ignore this. How could anything be free? Whatever you pursue, you will pay a corresponding price for it. There is potential for returns, but some things are not obvious, so you can't measure them right away. Most things people pursue come with other forms of costs. For example, dealing with stress, uncertainty, conflicts with difficult people, bureaucratic challenges, conflicts of interest, and enduring meaningless disputes, long working hours, and continuous external pressure. All these are the prices that must be paid to achieve success. The 16th rule: most competitive advantages eventually fade. For example, the shape of a horse has remained unchanged, and we know that a horse is much bigger than a dog. But do you know how big a python is? The earliest dinosaurs were only about 8 centimeters. How big is a brontosaurus? Human ancestors, millions of years ago, were only about 120 centimeters tall. Now, my daughter is taller than that. There is a trend toward larger species, but bigger species are more prone to extinction. In biology, body size can be seen as an investment, just like financial investments with leverage. Leverage can amplify your gains, but at the same time, it will also amplify your losses. When things go wrong, leverage can be deadly. This applies to animals as well. Larger animals are extremely fragile. An ant falling from a height 1.5 million times its own size wouldn't die. A mouse falling from a height 50 times its size would, at most, get a fracture. If an elephant falls from a height twice its own height, it would definitely die. If a balloon filled with water falls on the ground from a certain height, it will burst with a bang, but now, the average territory size of animals is larger. So, when land becomes scarce, competition is more likely to occur. Also, the food they need is more, so in case of disasters or famines, they are likely to suffer more. Large animals are not easy to feed, so their movements are relatively slow, and their reproduction is also relatively slow. This is why it's easy to explain that although Tyrannosaurus rex, cockroaches, and bacteria once lived in the same era, today, you can't see them except in fossils. But here's the strange thing. Evolution favors change, but up to a certain point, it protects what has already been established. This is a constant truth in every field. There will always be signs of decline in competitive advantages. There's no avoiding it. Point one perspective I have always found striking is that some people never start big companies. They only start small businesses. Although they don't make much money, even if they go out of business, it won't hurt them much. It won't break their bones. If you put all your energy into a giant company, you could make a lot of money, but if this company faces a crisis, you might lose everything. This is a universal principle. In every field, whether it's business, products, culture, or relationships, if something is popular in one era, it may fall out of favor in the next. You shouldn't feel constantly defeated. Few companies, products, musicians, cities, or authors can last for decades. What you remember today are all rare exceptions. Some organizations are big with strong competitive advantages, but the stronger they are, the more at risk they actually are, because they are constantly walking on the edge of extinction. Let's look at another point. We often underestimate the impact of emerging technologies. For those technologies that are about to change the world, our reactions usually go through the following stages. First, I've never heard of it. Second, I've heard of it, but I don't know what it is. Third, I understand it, but I don't know what it can do. Fourth, I think it's for rich people and doesn't relate to me. Fifth, I've tried it, but just for fun. Sixth, it's increasingly useful to me. Seventh, I can't live without it, what should I do? Eighth, how did I live without it before? Ninth, it's too powerful. It must be regulated. Similar things keep happening according to this pattern. Let's take a look at how we currently treat AI. What stage are you in? The 17th rule. The grass is always greener on the other side. Many people are envious of others and want to achieve what they have. But have you ever thought about what they went through? Would you want to go through the same? Most people wouldn't. But when it comes to data, people often don't tell you about the pain, anxiety, fear, and struggles they endured. They don't openly share their true feelings or failures. What they often display are just their glorious achievements. Therefore, when we compare our careers, businesses, or anything else with others, we must always remember that those with more experience understand that everything is marketing. It means that everyone is carefully crafting their own image to present themselves better and sell themselves to others. Although the degree to which each person markets themselves varies, everyone is consciously or unconsciously shaping their image. Since an image is crafted, there is a difference from reality. A filter is also applied to enhance skills and downplay flaws. So, after reading this, do you start to doubt the words of someone you admire? Are they not as perfect as you imagined? They could be just ordinary people with many things they never told you. Don't blindly trust others. You must go through your own experiences. Also, I don't have any food for everyone, and some of my bad habits or ways of doing things. This translation captures the essence of the original text, emphasizing the underlying messages about life's challenges, competitive advantages, perception, and self-presentation. Even my personality might not be what you imagine. Companies will never tell you that the values they promote are often things they themselves can't achieve. When we take a picture, it's sometimes hard to judge its true nature, which is why we often think that the grass is greener on the other side. The main reason is that they might have edited the photo. In Buffett's biography The Snowball, it's mentioned that his family life wasn't particularly happy, partly because he prioritized investing in stocks above everything else. This sometimes affected his relationship with his family. For example, he might have spent less time with his daughter or asked her to be quiet when he was working. These kinds of conflicts arose because of his priorities. Over the past few weeks, I've spoken less about these things, but they're still important. When I go out to have fun, I pre-record a lot of content so that I can keep posting it. Sometimes I record in the morning, other times in the afternoon, so I can take a few days off. What seems simple to you might actually involve a lot of behind-the-scenes effort that only I know about. There are times when I record content late into the night, which no one else sees. Most things appear perfect on the surface, but behind them lie hidden pains and struggles. You might think others are more capable than you, but the truth is, everyone has their own challenges. The more we idolize successful people as having extraordinary abilities, the more we might feel we'll never achieve the same. But in reality, they're just ordinary people like you and me. If you're willing to put in the effort, you can do it too. The idea that someone's abilities are overestimated is something I often remind people of. Famous professors, legal scholars, or political scientists might have strong views, but it's essential to evaluate everything independently, no matter who says it. One practical rule is that almost anything can become true under the right circumstances. A columnist from the Wall Street Journal said there are 3 ways to become a successful writer. 1. Tell lies to those who want to hear lies. 2. Speak the truth to those who want to hear the truth. 3. If the motivation is strong enough, even good, honest people can be led astray. This is a concept from social psychology. Besides economic motivation, cultural or group motivations also play a role. Sometimes people support something simply because they don't want to disappoint their group. But the most powerful motivation is the desire to hear and see what we want. When people are driven by a strong enough motivation, it's difficult to remain objective. What's New discusses how after World War II, researchers tried to understand why a society as advanced as Germany's could suddenly embrace something as horrific as Nazism. Many Germans supported Hitler's regime because, after experiencing hyperinflation and mass unemployment in 1923, he brought new ideas and jobs. When someone helps you out of a desperate situation, it's natural to support them. Personal experience is often more convincing than anything you can read or learn. If you haven't experienced what the Germans did back then, it's hard to understand why they supported Hitler. Rule 21 reminds us that while long-term thinking is important, it must be balanced with short-term needs. For example, over a 10-year span, everyone will experience economic recessions, stock market crashes, and other crises like COVID. If you try to avoid these things, thinking they won't affect you, you'll be mistaken. Even those who thought they were safe from COVID ended up being affected in some way. The third point is about sticking to your principles. Your partners, colleagues, significant other, and friends also need to stick with you in this. Patience is about perseverance, not stubbornness. Long-termism emphasizes the span of time, but it also stresses flexibility and adaptability. Say, as an adult, you have a 10-year plan, but then COVID hits, and the global economy is affected. You'll have to adjust your goals or timelines. Saying, "It's not my problem, I will achieve it tomorrow anyway," would mean ignoring the reality you face. Rule 22 is about simplicity. Facing challenges does not necessarily give you extra points. Humans have a strange tendency to love complexity and challenges, often overlooking simple and effective methods. For example, when it comes to diseases, prevention is better than cure. The biggest problem with modern medicine is that we focus too much on treating diseases like cancer. If we want to reduce cancer-related deaths, a lot of resources and energy should be devoted to cancer prevention. But there's a heartbreaking reality. Complex things are often more appealing to people. The Constitution of the United States has only 75 words, while any modern insurance policy or mortgage agreement has at least 15,000. Sometimes, it is necessary to consider all the various factors fully, but is complexity always better? In most cases, a few simple rules can dictate the majority of outcomes. If you've considered a few key variables, that's often enough. Adding more factors later often either wastes time or confuses you. Nature has already shown us this principle. As species evolve, the number of body parts decreases, but their functionality increases. Once you have mastered the core rules of a field, you will find that 3 to 4 rules cover 90% of what you need to know. Everything else is just different combinations or variations of these principles. The essence can be boiled down to: keep accounts balanced, save diligently, and be patient. These statements summarize about 90% of what you need to know about financial management. Regular exercise, eating natural foods, and drinking water, everything else is just noise. This is why books that are concise and to the point are more valuable. They contain fewer empty words. But why do people often pursue complexity and length over simplicity and clarity? There are a few reasons. Complexity gives people a sense of security and control, making them believe they are more knowledgeable or powerful. Those who don't know think that those who do know must be profound. The length of a work often serves as a proxy for the author's effort and thorough consideration. If something is too easy to achieve, no one values it. Okay, let's get to the final point I like the most. Wounds heal over time, but scars remain forever. Over the long course of history, humanity has constantly adapted and rebuilt its survival strategies. But the scars of suffering, once formed, will always remain. They profoundly change people's attitudes towards risk, reward, opportunity, and goals. Each person's experiences differ, so their thoughts, goals, ambitions, and values will differ. Because of this, they will express their own opinions based on different experiences. When unpredictable major events happen, the first response is that you think what just happened will keep repeating, and its implications and consequences will become clearer. For example, no one foresaw the emergence of the internet, but you would still predict that a similar event might happen again. The bigger the impact of an unexpected event, the harder it is for those who haven't experienced it to understand the thinking of those who have. The perspectives of two people are more closely related to their experiences than to their cognition alone. Periods of crisis will always pass, and the future will always be like this. I want to end with a few concluding thoughts for us to consider. We need to reevaluate which viewpoints are correct, but have been ignored by us due to unclear expression. If I were born in a different country or era, how would I view the opinions I currently support? Are they fundamentally wrong, but I stubbornly believe they are correct? What things, which I originally thought would only affect other countries, industries, or people, ultimately affect me too? What things have I taken as true, but are actually marketing or packaging? What things do I have a shallow understanding of because I haven't experienced them myself? What unsustainable trends am I yet to accept? What risks am I prepared to face that I haven't anticipated? If my motives change, what thoughts do I have now that I might change at any time? What things do I currently not believe in, but might find important in the future? What beliefs am I holding on to that might change in the future?